guys, BBI here. I want to stop and say thanks for tuning in and checking out whatever the video is about that's about ready to come up next. If you could take a minute and hit subscribe, I'd greatly appreciate it. And if you enjoy what you've seen here, make sure to hit the like button. We'd greatly appreciate your support. Anyhow, guys, all that aside, let's get on with the show. Sorry guys, it's going to be loud in this video. I'm not shutting down the air conditioning. It's like a jabillion degrees outside. So I got my friend Rob's Blue Label X-Force here. And somebody has repilled this because this got Toshibas in it. So it's two 2290s driving 1 or 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 transistors. We got just enough power supplies to do it. Barely. But somebody's also gone through and they removed the little capacitors that they use, and they put these metal clad Mylars in here. So what's going on is, he said I was just talking on it and it quit. Now I don't have any burned up input splitter resistors, and I don't have any burned up output combiner resistors. So that tells me that something went wrong very early in the amp chain in the box, right? So the RF comes in, hits this little mini piece of coax, comes around through this mess of wires over here, and then there's a high-low switch that's on the front of this thing. Okay? And all that is a resistor. So it's a voltage divider. And it knocks the signal down just a little bit. And then this little piece of unshielded wire that's here is what carries the RF down to the input. Well, we look over here at our input and we've got one burned up 2290. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do just a simple pop and swap. I'm going to pop the pill out, I'm going to put another 2290 in its place, and we're going to see if it takes off. And that'll allow us to check other things down the chain. So I got in here and probed. I do have input signals. So the RF is going in, it's fluxing this transformer. The input tune is not half bad. So knowing that going in, we know that we've got good signal from here to here. So it's something from here down, and it's most likely this transistor. It's going to be a pretty quick fix. We're going to pop this transistor out. We're going to, well, it's obviously bad, and we're going to change out the 10 ohm that's down there that's burned up. By the way, this has got the new X-Force board design in it. They started going to this about 4 or 5 months ago. We started seeing these show up over here. You got to remember, I'm kind of like usually about a month or two behind the changes that they make there at X-Force. We see such a large volume of X-Force amplifiers come through here that at the end of the day, they'll produce something new. Inevitably it'll break, then it gets sent here because of a lot of different reasons. And so we get to see the newer products that are coming from them. So they're kind of going back in technology a little bit. I don't know if you guys remember the insides of the old Messengers and Texas Stars where they were doing etched or machined etch boards. Well, this is a machine etch board where somebody goes in there with an actual cutting die and goes. Everybody got away from this in about the early 90s because there was so much amp loss that was taking place just on the ground potential side of things from the actual metal mass that's underneath the board. That's the heatsink that conducts most of the amp flow. In the surface area, there's such a pinching of amperage that takes place from A to B that they saw a huge performance difference. I mean, Dave was really the one that jumped on with that and really went all the way out with the all copper clad board. So to see this happen again, yes, it makes it easier for the speed of production, but no, it's not. I think you guys get where I'm going. So what I don't see is any 120 puff capacitors going to ground anywhere. But since the edges of the transformers are cut, and they're sitting up, and they've got notches in them now, the faces do. It's interesting. Hold on a second. It's very interesting. Huh. Interesting. Looks a lot like my transformer I now make. But the face is cut on it. When I pop this pill out, I'm also going to unsolder this transformer, and I bet you anything there's capacitors down underneath. Let's go take a quick look. What do you think? What does that old saying go? If you can't innovate, copy those that can. Grab a picture of that. So I'm not going to get too hung up on that. I'm not, because the slots at the bottom of the transformers aren't what make it work so well. Okay, what I am going to get hung up on is this here. So I called and I talked with the owner of this box. He got this from another vendor, and they're the ones that took the PPs out and put the Toshibas in the spot. The problem is that this whole half of the circuit is missing a bunch of vital components to actually make the amplifier work stably. There should be a 330 puff capacitor that goes from here to ground and from here to ground. So before I cut away in the last video and I removed this transformer, I thought, well, maybe they have the capacitors tucked down underneath and I couldn't just see them down underneath there. So I thought, I'm going to take the transformer out. I'm going to take a copy of, or take a couple pictures of the copy work that's taken place here. And I wanted to see if those capacitors are present. They're not here. And then over here on the 2879s, there should be a 120 puff capacitor. They're gone. They never were installed. Can't even find solder marks for them. So here's the thing, is the customer told me when I was just on the phone with him now, that when he first got the amp, it ran great. He was seeing like 1,300 watts, and then he started seeing 12, and then he started seeing 11, and he started seeing 1,000. I have a feeling that this thing, because they left some parts out, we might have some incredibly low gain transistors. So we're going to pull this one out, and I have not been in there and messed with it or anything. It's the way it was in the first video. So let me get in here. I'm just trying to understand what happened here, because I don't want to go and just replace the 2290 driver and then discover that all 12 of the other transistors are down on this thing. I don't want to call and tell the customer that. We're still in the diagnosis phase. We're not in the repair portion of anything yet. So let's take just a minute. We'll see what's going on here. Because I don't see any other burned 10 ohm transistors, and I don't see any burned capacitors. I don't see any signs of imbalance inside this thing. Tilt the viewer up. Yeah, I'm in frame. Okay. Very carefully move this out of here. Okay, cool. This still got a gain of 46. Okay, well, I'm going to call the customer up and tell him what we found so far. I'm going to put this transistor back in. We're going to put the 12-pill section back together. And we'll see if this thing turns back on. I was a little worried. Maybe his 2-pill section is what was slowly losing power output, because I don't see anything. Sorry about that. I forgot to mute my phone. I don't see anything that leads me to believe that any of these other 12 were bad. But with him telling me that he was slowly losing power, I feel that that's all specifically limited to the driver section. So let me go ahead. I'm going to call him up and tell him what I figured out. And we're going to place some 10 ohms, and we'll get to chooching on getting this thing back up and running. And then I got to add all the capacitors that are missing, and we'll go from there. So give me a hot minute. We'll be back. Hurting flipping kittens. I'd make a big stink about the transformer thing. I would. But what good's it gonna do? Cool. That one still got a gain of 30. Right on. Well, let's go in here and clean this up.
Yes, master. Right.
Slide this right back in its hole. Straighten out the legs. Can't get blood from a turnip, so. Thank God that this is not what defines me as a human being, right? Okay, so this 2290 that I just pulled out had a gain of 39. So I know it's good. So let's see if I can dig around and find another matching 2290 that I pulled out of something else that's got a fairly close beta gain. That way we can have matched transistors in this thing. Woo. Oh, cheating little son of a gun. Come on. Okay, retest. There we go. I think a 3940 and a 36 will fit perfectly together in the same little universe from now till the end of time. Just my opinion, of course. It's a somewhat educated opinion. We're within 2 beta gain of each other. So, straighten our tabs out. I could put a new transistor in there, but the new transistor is going to have a beta gain of like 76, right? Clean all the heatsink compound off of it. And so if I put unmatched transistors together in the same circuit, as soon as the thing goes into operation, it's going to try and match itself. They're going to try and match the gains to each other. And while it is doing that, it's going to take the transistor that's still got a beta gain of 40 and it's going to slowly pull it down. But the one that's got the brand new one that's got a gain of like 70, it's going to pull it down as well until it's going to try and match. They're going to try and match to each other. So you don't want that. You want something that's got roughly the same HFE gain, same kind of gate breakdown, or same kind of gain breakdown to the transistors. So you'll find that usually when the transistor goes into operation, just from the heat of the component running, you're going to lose a little bit of the beta gain. And just in an operation status, it'll lose just a little bit of love. Okay, so they'll normally fall down to about a 50, and they'll hang out there. And every time that the SWR gets a little bit too high, and every time the heat gets a little bit too high, and it'll cause a little bit of the beta gain to fall out of the component. A little bit, very slowly, one step at a time. Eventually it'll pull itself down to nothing, and then it quits. So now this here, this is the 2879 we pulled out of there. You see that? You see that shmoo that's on the foot of the transistor, that little piece of garbage? That unevenness in the transistor's foot is just enough to make the transistor quit. I don't know what it is, but it was hard as frig. So let's clean that off. Anything that causes a transistor's foot to be elevated, raised, or not have complete contact with the heatsink will cause you to have a failure. And that little piece of granola that we just cleaned off is definitely could cause that. Now they use so much heatsink compound over here at this place that change the transistors out. I don't need to really smear that on too thick, because there's a lot of love in that hole. Kind of like Jenna Jameson back in the day. There's a lot of love going on in there. A lot of white goob. Okay. Just got the crap cleaned off the bottom of the transistor. Let's screw this transistor down. And let's start putting it back together. Let's remove the scorched earth. Fucking 10 ohm resistor here. Let's get the same matching resistor as far as size and physical appearance. On the 50s. Some of those and some of those. Okay, so that's straight. Up here's got a 90. Come down about a 16th and got another 90. So this way it'll look the same, you guys. So your eye doesn't see it if everything is matched. But let's say you've got a little bit bigger resistor that's in there, right? Physically bigger. No one will know that this transistor is burned up unless they look at the lot number on the transistor. Okay. We want to clean it up to the best of our ability when we go to do something. We don't want to just slam it together. And we want to make sure that all the parts are actually in the damn circuit. Okay, so we're going to need 2 of these. 330 and a 330. Set those aside. We'll set the 120s aside for now. Let's tack this down with some magical freaking gray solder goob. Now, let's take the transformer and install it again. Solder up the front side. back side. Let's add a little bit more shmew to the system here. Solder down this one to its pad. Last two parts, guys. Okay, so now, in theory, this portion of the thing has been repaired here. But the primary thing that we got to go through and do is add all these caps. And I got to do that 12 more times all the way across before we can even key it up, because without those caps there, there's no control to the transistor, which is not what we want. I want to actually have the completed amount of parts in the box. So me seeing this, I can't just like turn my blind eye to it and go blame the manufacturer. I've got to actually add the components to make it right and safe. So now that we've got this all put back together, and I know this is all right, and we've measured everything and everything is balanced, let's go ahead and do our thing. Okay, Mr. R, you're all fixed up, man. Went ahead and added the 14 capacitors to it this thing was missing. The 120s, all 12 of those, and then the 330s that were missing there. Now, it's 240 on the input. So went ahead and we made sure all your caps are right. Played with your your output tune just a little bit. And let me put this thing in standby real quick. We're going to use the 2950, which does about 20 watts of drive. Got a 5-watt slug between the 2950 and the X-Force 2x12. Remember, these are 2290s, you guys. They're not 2879s. So the customer was telling me that the shop that sold him his radio for this thing set him up with a 955 to run into this thing. If those are 2879s and they're not 2290s, we'd be able to get away with that. Maybe. But with the 2290s in there, we can't do that. It'll overdrive the 2290s and cause them to go poof. So I informed the customer of that. We're going to hit this with the 25 30 watt radio. Okay. And then we're going to give it a quick little hop with the striker. Show the power difference, but which shouldn't be that much. But what we've got now is a fully functional, with all the right parts, power wire upgrades, and the whole 9 yards done to it. It's a 1,000 watt slug in 5X with peak power, 1,000 watt slug in average, 5 watt slug in reverse back into the 10,000 watt. We're in the high position. 26 to 2700 peak. And about 600 bird. Input tune. And that's from my very plain Jane, very anemic 2950. Now we're going to hook up the comp derail Cobra 29. And it does the same amount of watts as the 2950. Grab the microphone for it. About 12 bird. Watch the average meter. Goodbye. 1200 over 1200 bird. And the same 2600 PEP. This box is working fine now. We could squeak a little bit more out of it by going to the 2879s, but there's a downside. For every up, there's a down. So if I switch over and I go to the Cobra or the 2879 transistors as our driver section, yes, in theory, we're going to put more power into the 12 pill section. So in theory, we might get 3,000 watts out of it. The problem is we don't have enough power supply to actually pull that off all the time. Okay. The other thing I want to point out to the customer is this little switch. All that is a sideband delay. It's a relay delay. This thing does not have sideband in it. This is a Class C amplifier. So if you run this on sideband, give it a hot second, and it's going to kill all the pills. Just keep that in mind. Okay. So now we're going to hit it with the 955. About 90 PEP. Check this out. Now remember, we had a completely flat input SWR with the 2950, but because we're overdriving those 2290s so much, see that bottom scale? And look at what just happened. I just killed that perfectly matched transistor. The one we just replaced. So Mr. R, the moral of the story is, one, I'm going to eat that 2290. No big deal. I'd rather burn up that transistor and show you what happens. The 955 might make that thing put out 300-400 more watts. But the box can't handle it. Food for thought. So, let's start over again. Give me just a minute. Son of a bitch, couldn't plan that better if I tried. So let's do some basic math here. So, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 30 amp supplies. 30. It's 240 amps worth of potential amperage. Okay. Times 120. That's 2,888 watts of total power. Times, so we can get our efficiency, we'll say 70%, being very gracious. That's a total of 2,000-ish watts that this power supply can produce. Now, there's going to be some people out there, no, wait a minute, this is on 220. It is, but these power supplies are only rated for 30 amps a piece. It doesn't matter if it's on 110 or 220. So the reason that they have that switch in there is to allow us to be able to drop one of the phases out when it sees the 220 load. So it's still running on 110. Otherwise, the power supply would have a separate rating for being on the 220 volt because it could produce more amperage, which it can. 30 amp supply. Period. So to fully tax the power supply that's in here, we're going to see roughly about 2,100 watts. We're seeing about 2,500 to 2,600 watts, but now they've gone and they've added this voltage variable. So when you meter the voltage on this thing, it's floating at 15.9, which is fine, and under operation it falls to 14.9, and then fully modded out it drops down to about 14.2. Okay, so we're technically juicing the supply. This thing will not run if we drive it. It'll run, but for a very short time. If we put two 2879s in there, overdrive up the transistors, what happens? Amp draw goes up, more load on the power supply, eventually more problems for 300 more watts. We've already got all the issues going on with the lack of airflow that's going to be in this thing. This thing's only got 3 fans on it, and after the air has been pulled through the little tiny strainers that are in the back, there's no air velocity. There's hardly no air movement through this box. So Mr. R, please keep an eye on your air temperature. Constantly be back here feeling with your bare hand. If it's starting to get too warm to the touch, time to cut it off, let the box cool down. 35 to 40 watts max drive. And as long as we maintain that, depending on what kind of radio you got, either a stock like 35 watt radio or like a derail, Wolfman, CB shop, hot rod, friggin' does 1,000 bird. It'll run forever. Now, most guys would be upset that they chooched that 2290 on screen. I am not excited about that. I'm excited from a different point of view. I wanted to demonstrate to the customer what would happen if you overdrove it. Now, initially the goal is if I overdrove it, listen to that, I got the ice cream truck coming down my street. If I overdrove it, we're going to get a little bit more power out of it, but I was going to have the argument of, well, is it really worth risking the transistor? And then to have the thing quit within 3 keys. This poor guy has spent a fortune on this box and hasn't gotten anything more than about 10 minutes of talk time out of it. If you listen to me, run the amp the way I tell you to, it's going to last you a long time now. Mind your air temperature, watch how much drive you're putting into it, and honestly, when you get this back, now that you've watched this video, I guarantee you, Mr. R, you're not going to want to run your striker into it because you've seen what the results are. Just saying. Guys, I got to go. It's the end of a very, very long day. Relatively slow on the phone. Only had about 70, 75 phone calls today. And if you do the math on that, I want you to think how much time I've spent on the phone at about roughly 10 minutes on average per phone call. This has been a wild day. Very busy over here, and I got a lot of stuff going on. So I'm glad that we were able to get this thing finished up, buttoned up, tied up, and done. On that note, I'm out of here. If there's anything I can do for you, call this number right here. Or come visit us at www.bbiamps.com. Come follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, Instagram, and if you're watching this for the very first time on YouTube, please take a minute. Just click the subscribe button. If you like what you've seen, click like. Gentlemen, I gotta go. On to other things. It's 7 o'clock at night, and I've still got another hour worth of video editing to go, and I've been out here since 7 o'clock this morning. Appreciate everybody's patience. I'm doing the best that I can. I'll see you guys. Off to the next one. Bump, bump from the biggest duck in Idaho.